Hey guys, welcome back to the Mountain Bike Shed. Today we will be installing a new shift cable and housing on this mountain bike for the rear derailleur. It is mostly externally routed, but we do have a section at the rear where it's internally routed, so I'll be able to go over some cool tips with you guys on how to make that easy at home. I have, changing your shift cable and housing is one thing I don't feel like people do enough on their mountain bikes. So we're going to kind of take some of the mystique out of that for you today. Now, you'll see I've already removed our old cable and housing. What happened there is I cut it all away. I removed my shift cable out. I then trimmed my housing to the length of the internally routed section, and then I took that shift cable that I pulled off of my bike. I trimmed both the ends, make them nice and clean. I fed it through that housing that I left on the internally routed section, and then I pulled that housing out of the way. What that did, I left the shift cable in place, so now I have a nice guide to run my new housing through. So what we're going to do, now when you're running shift housing, you want to go the way that the shift housing is going to go. So I'm going to make sure as I'm running this cable that I'm running the cable the same way in which it came off. And I'm going to get us down to this section here. I like to pull a little bit extra through, especially if it was kind of a tight way, just to make sure that I've got enough kind of cable to play with here. I don't get caught up at all. So I can now take my shift housing or my shift cable and stick it into my shift housing. I typically stick it in about a foot or so. Make sure it doesn't come out this other end. That happens all the time to people. It will kind of just get a life of its own if you drop it and take off. So I'm feeding that shift cable, it's kind of stiff, into my housing, and I'm running the housing in, again, the direction in which it's going to run on my bike inside of this chainring. And as I'm slowly pushing the housing through this mysterious internally routed section, I'm letting this shift cable kind of run through my fingers. If anything, I'm creating a little bit of friction, and it's actually going further into the shift cable, but I'm slowly doing just letting it kind of come through. I don't want a bunch of extra shift cable getting bunched up in there, and I'm doing it nice and slow so I can kind of feel where that housing is in the internally routed section that I cannot see. So as we start getting closer, I'll feel that cable getting tighter and wanting to bend more, and that means that my housing is going to be close to the end, and then I can go really slow and help guide that out. The nice thing about using a shift cable to do this is your shift cable is stiff. So unlike a piece of string or even the Park Tool internally routed tool, it's not going to bend around on you. So you can really use that to control the end of your housing. So that's on. I can pull my old shift cable back out, toss it in the trash can, and now we're ready to get our housing addressed. So when we're looking at this, and I'll keep us up close, when we're deciding how much housing to put at the end here, what we want to keep in mind is we want a good gentle bend. So anytime we have, a really sharp bend, that's going to create extra friction on the cable. It's going to have a hard time shifting back into your high gear. So we want a nice gentle loop, but we don't want to get too crazy. I don't want that bent too much up. So that looks pretty good there. Once I've got that set where I want, I'm going to start running through my bike. And I'm going to clean it up a little bit. I don't want to I'm going to use my muck off bike wash. I'm going to spray my rag. I'm going to wipe my area. Everywhere where this cable is going, I'll make sure we're a clean process. And we're good there. Thanks, muck off bike wash. And then I'm going to grab zip ties and start zip tying this housing into place. If you have little plastic like C-clips, it can be a good idea to replace them with zip ties. Zip ties are also a really good thing to keep in your bag for your bike. I take my time to cut that off nicely. I'll pull all that extra slack that I left in there out. I think I'm going to be a zip tie short here, guys. Put all my zip ties in. This is going to ensure that my cable is running where it's going to run. So we can see this. I'm going to match the brake line that kind of comes out straight here. I'm going to do the same thing with that zip tie. Pull it nice and snug. Using my flush cuts from Park Tool. The flush cuts, cutting nice close cuts so that my customers aren't cutting themselves with a zip tie if their hand slides over while they wipe down their bike between every ride, which I know my customers are all doing. So anyhow, I'm going to keep installing. Now this one's kind of weird. There's all kinds of stuff going on here. Got 3 cables to reconnect. Again, pulling that nice and snug. I'm using my flush cuts. Cut that, and then I'm rotating that sharp part in towards the bicycle. All right, so now we're routed all the way through, and we need to figure out how long does my housing need to be, and we'll judge that by turning the handlebars the opposite direction they're coming around. Let's get you guys closer in and zoomed up. So what I did here is I turned my handlebars the opposite direction all the way. That's going to ensure that if I do go to full turn, that I'm not going to pull this brake housing out. So that's going to leave us the correct amount of slack. I'm going to double check and make sure everything's properly set up the way I want. I don't want to cut this too short, or I don't want to cut it too long. So with the bars fully turned, I want to make sure this is not contacting the frame, which it is not, and then I can trim my cable off. Very nice. The shift cables are going to have all these kind of long lines that stick out on it. Brake cables are going to kind of spiral. I always hit my brake cables in the grinding wheel and smooth everything out. With the shift cables, I don't worry as much about that. So if you're working with the Shimano system, you're most likely going to have a little plastic screw here between the levers. Pull that guy out, set it somewhere safe. And pull make sure my housing is where it's supposed to be. I put a plastic cap on this end. We'll do something different on the other end though. We want to use a metal cap on the other end. That area is moving and bending, so if you use a plastic one, they typically will break. It doesn't go well. If we're working with a higher end system, then we need to use ultra slick polished cables. Your basic galvanized cable, shift cable, is not going to work great on 10, 11, and 12 speeds. If you're on an 8 speed or something lower than that, then that's fine. Before I put this cable in, I made sure it was shifted all the way to my high gear. Run that cable in, and now I can jam it in. If you have really kind of weird routing on your bike or a lot of friction that's going to be caused, Rock and Roll does sell a product called Cable Magic. It is really nice to help kind of smooth out the system as well. But yeah, really nice. So I'm running this cable in. And we're pretty close, so then I'm going to insert my housing and pull the rest of the slack out of this. Like I said, we're not going to go with another plastic cap on the end of our housing. We're going to go with a metal ferrule on the end. So again, this area is going to have a lot of pressure back and forth. The plastic will bend and break pretty easily. So now that we've got that in place, I can run it. We need a 4 mil. Look and see if you remove this screw and plate off of your derailleur, you'll be able to see a little line cut out where the manufacturer wants you to put that shift cable. So, you know, look out for that. That's going to help give you clues as to how your cable is supposed to be routed. If your cable's meant to kind of route around like this and you just run it straight out, A, it could get caught in the wheel or something, but B, you could, before you tighten your cable up, adjust that down and then double check and make sure your high limit screw is properly adjusted. You'll hear that. So this is how you adjust the derailleur every time before you put any cable tension on. We're going to turn this high limit screw until it starts failing. It'll start wanting to jump up to that next gear. And then I'm going to back it off until it falls back down. Until it falls back down. Now what I realized, this person's drivetrain, you do need every once in a while, A, we need to lube our chain, and B, we need to lube these pivot points on our derailleur. So once the derailleur is clean, which this one is, I've already performed most of the tune-up on this bike. Any of these kind of moving points, use something like Tri-Flow. You can use your bike chain lube if you have to. But get this guy lubed up and ready to rock. I mean, I've had bikes where just simply because the chain was not lubed properly, we couldn't make a proper adjustment. So anyway, I've got my high limit screw, and now I'm just going to pull all the slack out of this cable and tighten the screw down. It's really hard working on this bike from underneath. Not gonna lie, guys, not the easiest. So I've got my high limit screw and I pulled the tension out of my cable and secured it properly where it wants to be. And now, I might have to stand, sorry. So I did the first time, nothing happened. I'm gonna tighten up my cable, nothing. So what's happening here is I click it in, it doesn't want to move up. So it means we don't have enough cable tension. Now I've already pulled a bunch off of here. I don't like that. So I'm going to start over. I'm going to put my barrel adjuster back in, and then I'm going to snug this cable up. When you're installing new cable and housing, before you really try to do fine adjustments on your cable tension, it's not a bad idea to just run through a couple times through the gears and just really help that housing settle in. So that's going to ensure all the slack's out of the system. And then I can pull the tension back out without moving the derailleur. This derailleur is in rough shape. There's a lot of movement, a lot of twist in it. Probably needs to be replaced here soon. But anyhow, now that I've got all the slack pulled out of my new cable, boom, pops right up into place. So I'm going one gear at a time to check my cable tension. You got a little bit of a delay there. So I'm going to shift back down to the gear before that delay, and I'm going to roll my cable or my barrel adjuster on my shifter up here. I'm going to roll that forward one click. So you'll feel little clicks in there. I go one at a time. And then I'm going to retry going up to that gear. That was nice and clean. So I'm good. Perfect. So if you're setting up something new or somebody hasn't properly adjusted your bike before, it's a good idea to stop here before you get to your highest cog. Pause, stop the wheel, and then shift while you're pedaling slowly. into your top gear. Now, we've got a couple of problems here that I noticed. I felt some kind of hit and vibration, which tells me my B screw is not properly adjusted. But before I get to that, I'm going to make sure my limit screw is where it needs to be. So in order to test the limit screw on the back end, I'm going to hold onto the frame, if I can, and I'm going to push my thumb on this knuckle right here lightly. If it moves, I know I need to tighten up my limit screw up there. It seems to be pretty good, but I'm not completely happy, and I like to tinker with things. Well, now, our B screw. Depending on what system you're running, this is a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 speed. I don't have a guide. Shimano and SRAM both provide guides for your 12 speeds. Use those. If you're working on 11 or 10 or 11 or 9 speed system, 8 speed, whatever else, we need to just kind of do this by feel and by look. Now, I'm not sure how well you guys can see this, but that top pulley wheel is so tight to the largest cog on our cassette. That's not going to work, so we need to dial that out. And what we're looking for is between, oh my God, something just clicked. What we're looking for is between 2 or 3 to 5 millimeters between the largest cog and our pulley wheel. So I'm going to dial that out a little bit. I'm going to shift down. If it happens smoothly, I know I'm on the right path. And then I can shift down. Now, if we have a bent hanger or derailleur hanger, we're going to start noticing issues here about mid-range as we're coming back down. If your cable and housing wasn't just changed, you may notice issues of it trying to come back down. If your B screw's not right, we may notice issues in there. However, we did a great job, and everything's shifting back down proper. So we are done. A little bit of a delay there still, so I'm tightening up my cable. Just take that out so we can be nice and perfect. And everything's functioning as it should. So that's a derailleur adjustment with a new cable and housing install. You guys can see behind Linda. Let's see if we can zoom in. Oh no, that's my bike build list. Yeah, that's how we adjust a derailleur. If we do that every single time, we're going to have perfect adjustment every single time. It's pretty cool how derailleurs work out. So anytime anybody comes into the shop, if they are looking, if they say, oh, my bike's not shifting right, this is the process we go through every single bike. So, you know, whether they say it's not getting into the easy gears, the high gears, the low gears, it does not matter. If I'm working on a drivetrain, we go through this exact process of setting it up every single time. Oh, a cool little thing you guys may not know about. So bicycle mechanics, anytime we crimp a cable, we all have a very specific way of doing it. I do 2 lines on the outside and then a diagonal line connecting. Some guys will just do 3, some guys do 2 at an angle. The reason that's kind of neat and interesting is I know that if I see a cable that's set up like this one, with 2 lines on the outside and 1 diagonal, that I was the one that installed that cable. So mechanics kind of use that to know our own work, and it helps us judge on how close things are going to be at first glance. But anytime I adjust a derailleur, anytime anybody tells me they have shifting problems, I take the tension off the cable, I check our high limit screw, and then I pull all the slack out of the cable. I reconnect it and I start shifting up one by one, increasing tension if needed. So if I go to shift to a higher gear and things delay at all, I'll go 1 click forward or anti-clockwise on my barrel adjuster on that shifter. On the rear it'd be forward. But I will do that and then I will shift back down. and then I will retry. If it still delays, and I'll do it again, and I'll keep doing that until we get the tension proper to where it just jumps cleanly into that next gear. We'll go all the way till we almost get to the top here, and I'm going to stop short of the top cog, and I'm going to take a look at my B screw and make sure it's somewhat close, and I'm going to stop the wheel. I'm going to shift as I slowly pedal into that big gear, make sure if my low limit screws off, that my chain doesn't go into the wheel. And at that point, then I can adjust my low limit screw by making sure it's in place. After that, I adjust my B limit screw. I make sure I have that 2 to 5 millimeters from my top pulley wheel or jockey wheel, whatever they call it, and my largest cog. Once I get that measurement, then I'll shift back down. And when I shift back into my higher gears, that'll let me know that I adjusted everything properly. Sometimes coming up, we can over adjust the cable, and it can give the false illusion that we have a good adjustment when we really don't. So as we come back down, that'll tell us things about, is our B screw adjusted properly? Do we have good cable tension? And is our hanger bent or not? So those are all really important. If you follow through those steps, low limit screw, cable tension, high limit screw, then B screw, then you'll have a perfectly adjusted drivetrain every single time, no matter what. The only matter would be that there is something broken or wrong. So that's it, guys. Tune in next time. Please like and subscribe if you found this helpful, and we'll put out more videos for you. See ya.